Morning, as the soldiers broke into the BNI area and approached the cell in which I was, they fired quite a number of shots and finally broke up the padlock. So we got out, and from there we moved to the broadcasting house, where I made that call.
June 4th came at a time when there was a lot of frustration in Ghana. Frustration by way of economic mismanagement, economic by way of national decadence, economic by way of kalabule. Kere kabure was an expression in the Hausa meaning keep it quiet, so every business was done secret. And all manner of things which were not acceptable in a Ghanaian society. That time also was a period when the Acheampong regime wanted to legitimize itself by union government. That is, because they saw that people didn't really want the military government anymore, they wanted to do it indirectly by way of having a union government, soldiers, policemen, and politicians. Of course, with the soldiers still dominating and he Acheampong becoming the head of state. The union government referendum brought a lot of trouble in Ghana, which I've put in my book, and Justice Aban really stood against it, and there was a lot of disaffection. Before then, the military government has moved from one stage of military junta to what we call the SMC, whereby all the senior military men were also members of the government. So the military and the government became one. So whatever the government also did was against the military. So people really saw the military at that time in the light of that coterminous relationship between military and government as one, and for that matter, unacceptable. It brought the image of the military, therefore, very, very low.
Confronted us in the administration. Remember, election had taken place, or was about to take place. So at least we were happy that the democracy process was working. So that was no difficulty for us. But the greatest problem we had was restoring the constitution in an enforced way, because the 1960 constitution was overthrown. The people decided to hand over and rewarded themselves with fat pensions when they have committed a crime, because the criminal code 1960 then and now says clearly that if you pick up an arm and overthrow a constitutionally elected government, you've committed treasonable offense, high treason, punishable by death. So with us, the capital punishment was clear. Coups have happened in 1966 and 1972. The issue is who then should be held responsible for it, to be tried and executed under the law. You see, now we had a problem, because where do you cut off? Because 240 names were given to us to be executed summarily. 240 names, noted, very important. And I mean, that was not a very reasonable request, you understand? We couldn't do it. So we decided at the council meeting, the parameters of our criminal justice administration was that we're going to use capital punishment, custodial punishment, confiscation of property, and instant justice. Right? Now, the basis for the first one was those who had the ultimate responsibility for carrying the armed forces into civilian politics in 1966, 24 February, and 1972, 13 January. They were the ones who could attract capital punishment.
It is not true that the ordinary Ghanaian doesn't like violence. That's what we say about everybody. They used to say that about the Liberians. that, oh, no, Liberians just like a nice time. They don't like violence. When they started the Civil War, I was there. Believe me, the things that they did, you would have been very surprised. They said the same thing about the Sierra Leoneans. Oh, they are nice people. But once they started, you'll be surprised. That's what we all thought, that Ghanaians don't like violence. But it was obviously not true. Once people start something, it's very easy for people, you'll be surprised, you'll be shocked at the people. They were just ordinary people. It happens throughout history. The people, whether they were Nazis, they are not special people with horns on their heads or anything like that. They are just your ordinary, everyday human being. They are like you. They are like me. They are the same people who shout about let the blood flow. They are the same people who behave like whatever your worst idea of bloodthirsty people are. We are the same. We are not special. We think we are special. We are not. We are like everybody else.
Soldiers were the enemy to many people, including students in general. There had been run-ins and demonstrations and stuff, and the military was seen as the enemy. But here was another type of soldier. Here was this group speaking our language, saying the things that young people and students and radicals wanted to hear. And so in the international community, in as much as we could have a discussion with people of our kind, we thought this was a good development. Because, here, remember, this wasn't a strange development in any case. Young, charismatic soldiers in either leading a revolution in Nicaragua or, having taken power in Cuba or anywhere else. So this was, in our opinion, and in the opinion of the kind of people that one was likely to speak with at that time, this was seen as that kind of development.
And so, because the senior people were necessarily the members of the government, the junior officers were disaffected, and they wished they could remove them. This was that disaffection which created the real problem. The civilians too, the economy was not going forward. The initial euphoria, about the revolution and people going all over the places and Operation Feed Yourself had all died down. Achampong had shouted, "Yentia, we won't pay our foreign debts," because he didn't have the capacity to go and negotiate. Of course, at first people thought that, oh yes, we won't pay. But sooner than later, we began to realize you cannot just shout you won't pay. This is not what is done in the civilized world. You do something good about it. As at the time the revolution occurred, one thing that is often forgotten is that Ghana had already, under the leadership of the then head of state, General Akufo, worked towards the return to constitutional rule. So in fact, one can say that if the process had been left alone, we would still have been able to peacefully have a change of government without what one may describe as a revolution. But the fact still remains that there was disenchantment, there was economic mismanagement, there was a lot of disaffection. The image of the military had come very, very low, to its lowest nemesis at that time. And for that matter, these laid the grounds for a dramatic event to happen.
Africa, to move forward, need to unite to control a larger size than Ghana, Sierra Leone, Gambia, Nigeria. You know, Americans did it, the Civil War, United and Russian Federation, Chinese, you know. So we needed to do that. So we wanted to initiate a warring movement that will consolidate our Africa home nation for us to begin to make realistic attempt to develop. Because as I now, I still believe that Ghana cannot go alone and develop. It hasn't got the size to compete with our European brother Nigeria. Not even Nigeria. With a developed country. Chinese economy. How do you compete with China? Population of almost 2 billion. Resources. America, Russia. And Nkrumah wanted to unite Africa by peaceful means. But you want, we have to fight. June 4th, Real June 4th, for the Africa movement was intended to initiate creating a war economy in Ghana that would rather threaten Togo to join or to take over, walk over and take over and create a hub of nations one after the other to constitute the new Africa home nation. Because Nkrumah used negotiation and hit the highest point. He couldn't go beyond that. And in any case, up to today, no continent, no nation the size of Africa have been united by peaceful negotiation. It hasn't happened.
Revolutionary Council, during our short stay in power, have demonstrated openly what many people had only suspected before, namely that the holding of office in government in this country had in almost all cases been used to plunder the wealth of the nation. Ghana is looking up to you. Thank you.
It was during the trial, after the 15th May uprising, that was when the whole dynamic changed. Because during the trial, first of all, Rawlings emerged as a hero when he said, "Leave my men alone." And the surprising thing was how the newspapers captured this and reported it correctly. Said, "Leave my men alone," and that sounds heroic. And even more so, when in the trial, he said he was not doing this for himself, etc., and that we're going to go the Ethiopian way. Now that will not make sense to many people, but at that time, Mengistu and a group of young soldiers in Ethiopia had taken over and promised a more equal society, a more just society from what had been the situation under the Emperor Haile Selassie. So when someone said they'd go the Ethiopian way, it was shortcut then for meaning accountability, to make sure the people actually come into power. So that was what changed the whole thing. Between May 15th and June 4th, this is what the discussion was about.
I knew him. I didn't know him as somebody who would be happy about leading a group that would be seen as violent. And even at that time, when you spoke to him, which I did often, he was not particularly anxious about lining up people and having them shot. But if you put yourself in a position where you are almost you've got soldiers who are on the rampage, and they say you must do this, you must do that, you've become a hostage to them, literally. Probably, he might not admit it, but it seems to me that is probably what he had become. He and those who... I remember the first, when General Achampong and General Utuka were killed. The evening before, Major Wachijan, or I think Captain he was then, whatever, had come to the office, the graphic office, and had told us, to me, that we should send a reporter to Teshi, to the range. That is how come the graphic was at that execution. That is how come we had to change our front page to carry the story and the photos of Achampong and Utuka being executed. That, it seems to me, like probably they met, they decided this was something they had to do to stop the agitation from the ranks. I suspect so. But having done that, I thought that was bad enough. Now, to then go on and get the others, the 6 of them, to kill, I thought that really was unnecessary. It is something that I think was disgraceful, and I said it at the time. And what upset me the most was all these people who were trying to hide behind this total chaos that we were in. People who, many of them, who had been beneficiaries of the military regime, many of them who, when the flight lieutenant had tried to stage his coup on May 15th, who all ran away, who, when we were trying to get somebody to defend him, we couldn't find anybody. And it took quite a lot of hard work to find even lawyers who would defend him.
Rawlings has made a habit of glorifying corruption. It has nothing to do with June. Corruption was just one of the three areas of punishment. That is confiscation of properties that were acquired corruptly. If any of them, the generals, those who were to be executed, and those whose property were to be confiscated or who were to be detained, were found to have acquired property over and above what they could have earned if they had not been involved in the coups, then those properties were also going to be confiscated. That's corruption. So there are three things we are talking about. The confusion is that we try to confuse the three: the capital punishment, the custodial sentencing for management of an illegal act, enterprise, and using it, your role in it, to acquire assets that you could not reasonably have acquired if you had not been involved. Therefore, it's corruption. And there was instant justice. People who just decided to do their own thing.
So I know a certain young man here. I've known him for some years. I didn't know his father used to be a soldier. He was writing about himself. It's called District. And he wanted to stand some district assembly elections. He came to me and he had written something on the paper about his father and how his father lost his life whilst he was a member of the army. So I asked him exactly what it was about. He told me his mother and his father were sitting down eating. Some soldiers came for him during that revolution period, and that was the end of his father. They never saw him again. The man, of course, is not mentioned anywhere. How many people are there like that? And as he spoke, he started crying. He never saw his father again. He stopped school. Having killed people in the circumstances that you did, what about your own accountability? Because when they collected so much money into account 48 and they asked all and seized all manner of monies, they never accounted. And for that matter, it became even a big controversy between Plundering and Rawlings. Plundering came down from abroad to come and demand that those people who were in control of the money should come and account.
To the officers and men. From there, I was invited to join the vehicle, the Pinsgoer, and to stand at the back. And I was flanked by some of the men that morning. As we drove out of the broadcasting house, all the way down to Birmingham. And as we entered Birmingham, the kind of exercise, activity, the combat atmosphere that I'd seen that morning into the broadcasting house was completely absent in Birmingham. Birmingham that morning as we entered was like a cemetery, dead silent.
So we believe that unless we have a plural democracy functioning on a war economy footing, put on a war economy footing, mobilized economy, forget it. It's not going to happen.
My friend and my good friend should have an apology, because he himself admits that the way he thought June 4th will go and what he thought June 4th should stand for in the end, it did not happen that way. And he himself has stated that certain people hijacked June 4th for their own purposes. And it was those very people who then made it metamorphose into 31st December. Because, as he told me, there were certain persons who had a hidden agenda.
Flight Lieutenant Jerry Rawlings, it was, who appointed me editor of the Graphic. Not necessarily. I think he knew me well enough. He knew me well enough to know that I would try to run the paper in a way that would bring credit, not just to the paper, but to the country and by extension to whatever he was trying to do. Because I was determined that we would do what is right and proper. He appointed me. Yeah. I've never denied that is a fact. The fact that some people thought I was critical of him doesn't, but he appointed me. And he knew what he was doing. It's not, nobody made him.
In the first place, you know, the previous year, Akufo had taken over from Achampong in what we called a palace coup. It was a bloodless palace coup in which they got rid of Achampong because they hoped that by replacing Achampong with Akufo, the popular disquiet and, you know, anger would somehow disappear. And they'd even set the date for new elections in July, I think. So, in a way, things were a bit like settled. But at the same time, there was the feeling that something was going to happen. Indeed, the idea that something would happen was more in the previous year. You had this feeling more in 78. But as I'm saying, that appeared to have gone down because of the palace coup. But still, there was restlessness. People were profoundly unhappy.
Freedom, toils of the brave and the sweat of their labors, toils of the brave which have brought results. Kwame, the star of Ghana, Nkrumah, star of Ghana, everybody toils of the brave and the sweat of their labors, toils of the brave which have brought results. Ghana, we now have freedom. Ghana, land of freedom, everybody toils of the brave and the sweat of their labors, toils of the brave which have brought results. Gold Coast will thank Nananom and elders, late Gesli Hayford, Mensan Saba, Pa Grant, Sergeant Ajete, and all who fought for freedom. Everybody! toils of the brave and the sweat of their labors, toils of the brave which have brought results.
I don't know why sometimes God decides to give us so many lives. At a certain moment, instinctively, I just felt a dangerous situation, and I vaulted out of the back of the vehicle, still holding onto the bar, and at that split second, a bullet hit where I was standing. No warning. But I'm just talking about sometimes the power of intuition. As I made my way to the side of the vehicle, hanging onto the door, unfortunately, the ricochet hit the soldier who was the airman who was next to me. But as I was hanging on the door and the driver was making his way for the rest of, the 25 meters and right left into the quarters, I noticed the bullets that were flying at us were not hitting us, apart from the first one that was made on me. They were hitting the lower part of the vehicle, the tires, etc. And the soldiers and the airmen were still alive in the back of the vehicle. That's when I began to sense something interesting. Ladies and gentlemen, at the appropriate moment, I jumped off the vehicle, by which time, of course, soldiers, some even in their underwear, out of their bedrooms with their wives and children from the two quarters, all sort of moved out, wondering what was going on, and were running away from their bullets towards the Air Force station, the road. And I was following them. We were all on the run. I was going to my station, but they were running away. I don't know where to, but away from the bullets. Ladies and gentlemen, as if by some command, I don't know whether you've ever seen birds whenever they're flying, and on cue, they would veer, of course, and they would all turn in formation. I think we've all noticed that. That's what happened in front of me that morning. I think both soldiers and their wives must have realized, where are they going to? It was an interesting psychological moment, because at that instant, soldiers and their wives just veered into the line of fire towards the left-hand side where the armory was. At that moment, I realized that corruption had sparked the rage of this nation. The nation was angry, was in a state of anger. That was a beautiful moment. They were going to fight it, wherever it was coming from. And I continued, broke through the wire, got into the aircraft that had been prepared for me with the weapons on board. I took off that morning, and I needed to check whether the weapons had been properly, aligned. So I flew down to the sea, and there was an old vessel, big, ship that had been built in the sea sand for many years. That was what I used that morning for a target practice, just to check whether my weapons were proper. Ladies and gentlemen, so I fired a few shots into the sea, middle of the boat. It was dead on target, and then I headed straight to the broadcasting house with the fighter aircraft. Because obviously, to counter the effect, that's where the armored cars were going. Now you listen to the second interesting event. When that moment came, and I was driving the aircraft, because I noticed one of the armored cars, to fire at the armored car, at the last moment, once again, something just put me off it. I lifted the nose of the aircraft away from the armored car and fired the shots beyond the wall of the broadcasting house. In other words, I did not fight, I did not hit the armored car from the air, which is what maybe I should have, but I refused to do it. How interesting. Later that day, when we were hearing one another, giving an account that evening of all that had been happening, can you believe also that the armored car that I refused to fire on also had been given orders to fire at the soldiers, Raji, etc., in the broadcasting house? And he did fire. But you know what he did? He didn't fire at the soldiers. He nosed his weapons down and fired short of